Let's talk for a minute about the personal military that Donald Trump is creating for himself and that we are paying for. A personal military that will be used against us, because that's exactly what he's doing. If you take a look at Trump's 2026 budget, you will see that he wants to drastically cut the funding for various law enforcement agencies, which you wouldn't expect, right? Because Donald Trump, his big thing is, fighting crime. He's such a crime fighter that he's deploying the National Guard and threatening to deploy active duty military onto the streets of America to fight crime. Yet, he is cutting the budgets of the FBI, the ATF, the DEA. The DEA? Isn't Donald Trump such a warrior against drugs? Isn't that the reason why he just blew up a boatload of Venezuelans? Yet, he is simultaneously cutting the budget of the Drug Enforcement Administration? That doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, it does make sense when you consider the fact that he is drastically expanding the budget for ICE. In that bill that they passed recently, he increased the budget of ICE to $100+ billion a year, which is greater than the annual military budget for nearly every country on the face of the earth. So why would he be cutting the budgets of certain law enforcement agencies and dramatically increasing the budget of ICE? Well, it's because he is creating ICE to be his own personal military. Now, it's a dual purpose, really, because lots of what Donald Trump does serves two or more purposes simultaneously. On the one hand, he is using ICE to do his mass deportations, to, as best they can, ethnically cleanse the United States of America. And now, given the fact that that the Supreme Court, see, I'm getting ahead of myself, has rubber stamped Donald Trump's ethnic cleansing strategy, because they just said it is perfectly fine for government agents to stop people, detain them, arrest them because of the color of their skin. And so, with the approval of the Supreme Court, Donald Trump is using ICE to ethnically cleanse the country. But he is also using this idea that he is just going after illegal aliens as a pretext for the broader purpose of ICE, which is to serve as his own personal military. Because if you're going to be a proper authoritarian, you need your own personal military. Now, he has the military, which he's also sort of using as his own personal military. He's got, one of his chief cultists in there as Secretary of Defense. They will do anything that Donald Trump wants them to. However, there's a couple of problems potentially with the military. One is you do have this pesky little thing called the Constitution and the law. Now, I know Donald Trump, that's not an impediment to him. He's going to do these things anyway, but it's clearly illegal and unconstitutional to use the military in the way that he wants to use the military against American citizens. It would be cleaner, legally speaking, if he had his own personal military, so he didn't have to rely on the actual military quite as much, something that would be more legal. So that's one problem. It's not really an impediment to a dictator, but, it could get a little messy. The other potential problem you have is that depending on how far you go, you may get pushback from the generals. You may have generals that say, no, we're not going to do that. After all, they are obligated to disobey illegal orders. Now, that's one of the reasons, obviously, that Donald Trump is purging generals from the military if he in any way questions their loyalty to him. But again, it is still something that could potentially be a problem. It would be much cleaner and neater and easier if he had his own personal military that was actually a law enforcement agency, because there are no constitutional or legal problems deploying law enforcement agencies anywhere in the country that you want to, as there would be if you deploy the military. And it's good. So I mean, before I get there, so it would be good to have your own personal military that doesn't have any of the legal constraints, even though you're not going to abide by the law. But it would be nicer just not to have any legal constraints to begin with. But it's also good to have redundancy in your dictatorship. It's also good to have backups. Okay? If you're going to use the military to suppress the people, well, I mean, that's good and that's effective, and you can get away with it if nobody opposes you or does anything about it. But it's also good to have another army, a different legal entity that is also your own personal army. So he has built in with ICE a backup military that he can use to supplement the actual military, or he can use instead of the actual military. And maybe that will be his preferred course of action once he gets ICE built up to the point that he wants. Now, remember, he's only just gotten all this increased funding for ICE not long ago. And they are in a hiring frenzy right now, trying to hire all these people. And so it hasn't been built up to the level of strength that he needs it to be and he wants it to be. So he's still needing to rely on the military. But maybe once he has ICE built up to the point he wants it, maybe he won't feel the need to use the military to suppress the American people. So that is what I think is going on. The other reason I think that he is building up ICE as his own personal army is that when you look at the cultures of these other various law enforcement agencies like the FBI and so forth, they have typically been much more professional and independent and serious in their fidelity to their jobs. Now, of course, there have been bad actors in the FBI and these other federal agencies as well, but ICE has always been much more brutal and thuggish and rogue and much more supportive of Donald Trump to begin with. See, because if you're going to have your own personal army, you want to make sure that they are personally loyal to you. And so if you're going to try to use ICE or, the FBI or one of these other agencies, you're going to have to clean them out of a lot of careerist holdovers. But you know what? If you take ICE, which is an agency that is already overwhelmingly predisposed to you, you have a lot less house cleaning to do. And so as you build it up, you can hire only new people who pledge their personal loyalty to you. So I think that is what is going on. That is why we have the increased budget for ICE, not just for mass deportations, which it's also for, but it's also in part pretextual as a cover for his more long-term plans. Because the mass deportations are not long-term. He wants this done. He wants to ethnically cleanse the United States, get rid of all these people as quickly as he can. He will then have that army that he used to do that in place now for his more authoritarian aims, where he can train that army on the American people. Because what happens when we've rounded up all the scary brown people? Are we just going to then reduce the size of ICE? Hell no. And what will they then have to do once we've sealed the border and no new people are coming in and we've gotten rid of all the people? What is that? A huge federal agency that with a budget bigger than almost any military on the face of the earth, what are they going to do at that point? They're going to have nothing to do, right? No. You can then use them to control the people, because that's what you're going to have to do. If your plan is to be dictator for life, you need an army that will do your personal bidding to protect you from the people. That's what all good dictators need, their own personal army. That's what ICE is. That's what's going on. Anyway, thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.